Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's enjoying their Tarot Tuesday. It's me, Sarah G. Witch MD. That is a master of divination we have here. Tonight is my first podcast, and I do have a first guest. That is the wonderful and the fabulous Brian Dancero of Evolving Vibes. Hi, Brian.
Hello.
Hi. So we know it's Tarot Tuesday, right? So I was
Hmm.
thinking that maybe we could shuffle and pull a card. So I'm going to
Sure.
pull a card. I'm going to pull a card and I'm going to tell you what I think it means, and you can tell me what you think it means, and we can go from there. Okay?
Absolutely.
Because everybody has a different version of what tarot looks like to them. So it's not just by the book, as you and I both know. So let me do that. I'm going to do a little shuffle here. You know, I love a good shuffle.
And you shuffle so well.
Oh, thank
Like
you.
I'm
Thank
envious
you.
the way you just.
You know what I say to a lot of people, because in my readings, what I'll do is I'll give my client or whoever I'm reading the deck to shuffle. And I always say, you don't have to do it like me because I do it all day long. But you know, people are like, that's a good shuffle. I do like a good shuffle. So today's card on this fantastic Tarot Tuesday, we have the Star card. So, you know, the
Ooh.
Star card, and this is the Golden Art Nouveau deck. I use this a lot in my day-to-day stuff in my office, but the Star card, I think everybody kind of has that recognition of that card, not only because of the way that it looks, but because it has that ethereal kind of vision meaning in it, right? It's like that we don't necessarily know exactly why we do certain things or why we're in a certain position, but we have the trust and the faith and the wherewithal in that way of just going in that direction. You know, it's kind of like this. We don't know why we do the things we do, but there is a specific reason. And as long as we trust what that reason looks like, then we can go forward with that. So that's the way that
Exactly.
I view, yeah, that's the way that I view the star card. But what about you? Is there anything that you kind of look into that or say differently?
And that's a good question to ask because a lot of times it does depend on, I think, the querent, who you're actually reading for, and the energy that you're getting off of that person. For me specifically, the star card, especially right now in this
Okay.
circumstance, I do believe that card is really about, hey, this is time to follow the energy. So very similar to what you're saying, but it is rather than trying to go against the tide, follow the energy and actually pick up on what paths you're supposed to be led down. And I think that's really important right now, or relevant right now, at least,
Hmm.
because it's your first podcast and it's your
Oh,
first. When you really think about it, though, it's your first
yeah.
podcast, it's your first new journey, and it's not time for you now to follow the energy that actually you're attracting and leave the energy behind that is no longer really relevant to you any longer.
Right.
It's kind of an interesting card to pull up for your first broadcast.
Yeah, and you know, I think that a lot of people resonate with that card because not only is it seen all over the place, like every tarot tapestry you
Everywhere.
ever look at, right? It's all the moon, the sun, and the star. I mean, it makes sense for just in general that we have to kind of trust where we're going without really having a barometer or a compass that's going to tell us exactly where we need to be. So, in that kind of vein, you know, I think that it's a good segue into the next kind of topic that you and I can kind of get into besides tarot. But what else do you do, and what else? How did you come to be where you are right now? So if you can tell me a little bit about that.
And that's an interesting question and a fair one. So, what I like to talk about, or when I do talk about it, when people ask about it, I talk about awareness and about when I became aware. And it was probably as a kid, like quite literally very, very young. I'd find myself always wanting to be outside in the woods, taking leaves and taking twigs and taking all these different herbs and creating a potion, if you will, without even realizing I was actually doing that. And I think through my journey, it's been a journey of certainly learning because that's what we're here for. But along with that, and more importantly, remembering and really becoming more familiar with one's inside and listening to the whispers and to the spirits. So there's a lot of where I am today, which has been through past experiences, of course, but a lot of it too is just sort of like self-realization and coming to,
Mhm.
into awareness of
Right.
where I need to be and where actually I'm going. because like
Right.
we talked about with the star card, it's following the energy.
Hmm.
For me being a Virgo, I'm very much itinerary and control oriented.
Hmm.
And so that was the largest hurdle for me to jump over on this path and on this journey. It's from where I've
Right.
been to where I am now.
Right. Like a dichotomy of sorts, because we know, and if you know anything about the astrological signs or anything about horoscopes in general, and you know anything about Virgos, Virgos like to be very nice and fair, nice, and this is the way it looks, really nice, and everything kind of has its own place and fits in a certain kind of environment, which makes a lot of sense of why you'd have to get over that and understand that to trust your process is not to trust you, like you said, the itinerary, which is really funny. I'm a Scorpio, so I do things based on, how I feel automatically, right? It's always based on a feeling, or it's always based on what I'm doing in that moment. Scorpios are known to be very loyal creatures, as well as doing things for a specific purpose. Everything's kind of done for a thing, right? To do a certain thing.
Exactly.
But I think it's really funny that you say that in looking at yourself and the self realization that you've come to this conclusion of becoming who you are based on the fact that you had to step out of your comfort level or your comfort zone, not only based on what your sun card is, but or your sun sign is, but also based on the fact that that was your realization of becoming who you are. And I think that it's really important that we look at the idea of that, the term witch for what that it is doesn't mean that you're cackling around a cauldron, with a crow on your shoulder.
However
Although,
fun.
yes, however fun. Although you have, a beautiful cockatoo that you use instead
True.
instead of that crow. But I think that it's really funny to say that and be like, it's not just the term witch, it's like this is the belief that we have. And I'm curious to know, when did you kind of come into that, and I'll explain why I did too later, but how did you come into that and decide that this is what I'm doing, or this is where I am?
And that's a fair question. And it really started at like 10 years old for me when I started to realize that I was different than most other people. For one thing, being able to communicate with non-living people.
Yeah.
For another, actually being more comforted by that communication versus with real people. And one can also chalk it up as being an introvert, but I tend to say nay to that. As I started seeing that I was different, my sister Diane was one of the key components for me because she too was very much like that. We
Hmm.
share a lot of that same abilities as well as beliefs, so to speak. So it began at 10, and then as I started getting older, I started becoming more and more comfortable with asking questions like, well, why is Christmas called Christmas? Why is it on the 25th? And a lot of things like that. And as I
Hmm.
started progressing, it became sort of like, it's hard to describe, but remembering and learning, like going out
Right.
in the woods, going out by the woods, very much
Hmm.
natural to me. When I had a wish, I wanted something that I wanted to get away from me, writing it on a stone and casting it out into the river. And
Hmm.
as I was doing this, I'm like, there's got to be a reason for this. So I started
Hmm.
researching and like, oh, look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like that, same thing, having the ability to understand things a little bit differently than most people. And yes, does that categorize you as weird? Kind of, but I think that the understanding what life looks like through a different set of eyes, as opposed to what we've been taught, what we're supposed to be in line with, and really embracing that at whatever formidable time that you do. For you, it was 10. For me, it was about 14, which makes sense,
Yeah.
but also, kind of putting the ties together of familiar situations, not familiars as we know them to be,
As
our
these
witches
guys behind
familiars.
me.
Right, exactly. I don't have any in my office today because I kicked them out, but there are three cats that hang out in the building that my office is in, and everybody assumes that they're mine, but they're not. They just hang out by me. But
Of
it's
course.
funny. Yeah, of course they do. But it's just funny to me because we kind of come to these conclusions by ourselves, and then we're looking at life a little bit differently, and then you don't have a label per se. And I feel like the term witch and what that it is doesn't signify that we do the witchcraft, or that we do Wicca, or that we do anything, except that it's more of a lifestyle, and understanding that people do things differently, and they have different beliefs, and they do what feels good to them, and following that belief or that intuition or that feeling kind of leads you down the path of becoming a witch. And I
Absolutely.
feel like, yep, and I feel like, and I'm glad that you agree with me there, because then you kind of get into a pattern of understanding things differently when you meet certain people, and you're like, I like that person, and you trust that feeling about yourself as you go forward, and say, I trust that person, I like that person, I'm feeling good about it. And the more that you get kind of in tune to that, the better you feel about making some decisions within your life and moving forward. But on the other side of that comes the form of divination. What you and I both do is totally different, yet very similar. So can you tell me a little bit about what you like to do in the terms of divination, and what divination looks like to you?
Sure. For me, I like performing various types of divination. So
Hmm.
it depends on my mood and exactly what I want to work with. So my most common form of divination, which is pretty much daily, is tarot. Like we
Hmm.
talked about before the broadcast, I sent you the card that that you literally jumped out of the deck for me,
Yeah.
and that's something that I do on a regular basis throughout the
Hmm.
day. And sometimes I'll just be shuffling cards to see which one's going to fly out because I'm looking for a message I need to hear.
Hmm.
So that's one form. On various moons, I'll use either my crystal ball, or I'll use water for scrying, or I'll use a mirror for scrying.
Hmm.
Another very common tool that you know me, so I carry around with me all the time is a pendulum.
Hmm.
And I just love the feel of it, the reassurance. But it helps me when I use the pendulum to really connect with spirit to
Hmm.
get any advice I need from spirit at any given time.
Right. Yeah, I think that all of those tools are really awesome and great. And I think that the term divination, as we know it to be, just means to connect, to receive messages from the divine, right? And in
Exactly.
essence, the divine can be looked at as the universe. Some people call it the universe. Some people refer to it as the divine. Some people refer to it as the higher power. However you look at it, it kind of all molds into one. It's just very personal to how you say what it is. But divination, and what that it is essentially just to receive messages, whether that's a yes or no, whether that's a left or right, whether that's any sort of direction in any sort of thing. That's the way that I look at divination. And as we know me to be Le Chat Noir Tarot, tarot seems to be my number one, most comfortable form of divination that I do. But I also do other things. I work with pendulums as well, and crystals as well. But I like to also do table tipping, which is another form that you just receive messages, whether that's a yes or a no, like I said. It doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be, a big whole long conversation with your loved ones that have passed. Sometimes we just use these tools to navigate through our daily existence. And I think it's really important to look at it in that sense, to say it's not all woo woo. Sometimes you just need a little reassurance, and sometimes you just need a little bit of help from a different sort of perspective. And if we look at that, and that's why we do what we do, and that's why we call ourselves witches, because we kind of trust a different form. I think that that's kind of important to look at and say, like, it's not craziness, but at the
Exactly.
same time, it's just a guide in that, we're trusting something else besides ourselves to give us some sort of direction, or a litmus test of what needs to happen next. You
Exactly.
know?
And I
Yeah.
think too that you hit the nail on the head, Bob, with divination. We're connecting to the higher energy, whether we want to
Hmm.
call it, like you said, the higher
Yep.
power, universe, divine, whatever we want to call it. We're
Hmm.
connecting to it, which for us, like we literally can sit here and say,
Hmm.
we know we're always connected to it because we're part of it. And it's part of the human experience that most people don't recognize within themselves. Once you
Right.
start connecting to self, you're connecting to whatever your higher power may be. And that's
Hmm.
where the messages will come in if you allow yourself to be open to it. People can experience deja vu. And most of
Hmm.
the time, when someone's experiencing that deja vu, it's because they're relaxed. They're going through a process where they're being quiet. And without even realizing it, they've connected to self. And then
Hmm.
boom, you're getting a message or you're getting that experience of, oh, I have been, or I think I have been, or heard this before.
Right. Isn't that funny that that's kind of, I feel like the lowest level of connection is that deja vu. Like, I've been here before. I've seen this before and I know that I shouldn't, but I do. And I've met that person. That is, how I would describe the universe kind of connecting to us and saying, hey, pay attention because this is going to be important, or there's going to be something that's happening that you need to be aware of. And that's the lowest, kind of easiest form to kind of recognize, because we've all experienced that, no matter what level you are at, or no matter what situation that you're in, that deja vu of kind of knowing something without knowing it, and
Exactly.
trusting that. So it's I really want to agree with you on that and say that the better you get at trusting that unknown is the better that you're going to get at relaying messages, whatever they look like. And that is what divination is in its essence, or its lowest form, if you will. So, I love the fact that you said deja vu, and then it kind of progresses and it turns into this bigger thing when it comes to, you get called to use cards. You're like, I've never read this before. I'm going to read this book, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be here. Right. And kind of understanding self a
Yeah.
little bit better just based on the tools that we use. And the tools
Yeah.
aren't meant to be scary. They're not meant
No.
to be frightening or to invoke evil to come through, as most people, who really don't understand it, to kind of be. And I think it's really funny that people do that, but only
Yeah.
because we trust it.
And I'm kind of glad that you actually mentioned that, because everything that we do has been stigmatized to be
Mm,
evil or connecting or worshiping the devil. But one thing I always try to tell people or explain away, or explain to especially like witchlings that really don't have a lot of experience in any of this,
right.
is first and
Witchlings.
foremost, right? First and foremost, you got to believe in the devil. You got to believe in a God in order for that to have any empowerment over you. We
Hmm.
believe in the divine universe, and we certainly
Hmm.
believe in nature, and we worship nature as pagans, as witches,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it. But the
Hmm.
reality of it is, people put stigmas on things in order to, in my opinion, deviate the populace
Yes.
from getting involved in it.
Right.
And I
As a
think
form of control, right?
exactly right.
Yeah.
And
And I
that's been
think,
going
yeah,
on for centuries.
is exactly. And I think that, whatever you believe in, you can believe in all of it, you can believe in none of it, you can believe in some of it. It's all very pertinent to you as your own individual and your own person. And
Exactly.
that's where we differ when it comes to, as a, what we would call ourselves witches, is because we differ from the ideal that you need to believe in a certain thing, because what that need or that belief of that certain thing is just to kind of keep you at that moment of, control. And when you release that and say, I believe in all of it, or none of it, or some of it, or a little bit of it, then you kind of have your own inferences and your own control over what it is that you look at going forward. And
Exactly. And it's
I love that. I think that that's incredible, because we're individuals and we can all believe in whatever we need to make our lives what we like it to be.
exactly. And you can be a Christian and be a witch. You can
Right.
be of
Yep.
organized religion and still recognize and practice paganisms or various aspects of it,
Right.
like the wheel of the year or certain other aspects. You
Right.
can do a lot
Yeah.
of these things, and a lot of Christians don't even realize it, that they're celebrating throughout the year all these different pagan holidays that we
Right.
celebrate.
Like birthdays, blowing out a candle on your birthday and
Exactly.
making a wish. Like,
Ritual.
yep, I know. Bing, ritual. But I feel like a lot of people don't even recognize, like, when you hug and kiss somebody goodbye and wish them well, like, what you're doing is you're setting an intention for them to do something awesome going forward, right?
Exactly.
And just those little things that we're doing that we don't even recognize is part of this ideal of trusting yourself and trusting that universe to lead you in the right direction, as well as put that intention out there that you want good stuff to happen. And I think that that's really interesting to kind of point out and say, like, we've been doing this, all of these little rituals and all of these little, scenarios throughout our lives that we've been taught to do, and it's really based on so much of a deeper meaning, historically, than just, this is just what we do. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see how when you start talking to, because I'm lucky enough to be able to get out and meet with and talk with different groups, like when I do hypnosis and other stuff. But
Hmm.
it's important to for me anyway, to see that aha when they start asking questions about witchcraft and about paganism, and you
Right.
start bringing examples like, well, as a kid, did you ever throw salt over your shoulder? Did you
Hmm.
ever? And like, oh my gosh, well, that's
Right.
from millennium old types tradition, and that's literally
Right.
what we actually worship and what we actually are.
Right, and we honor that, and I think, all those little idiosyncrasies, like when you pick up a dandelion and you blow, and the little puff of all of the little dandelion seeds go off and you make a wish, and, like, doing all those innocent things, if you think at the core level, it's so innocent and so pure, and that's why you trust in yourself to do these things, right? It's not based
Yeah.
on, "This is what we're told," or "This is what we need to do." But, I did wanna kind of circle back and talk to you about the hypnosis. Now,
Hmm.
tell me a little bit about that and how you kind of fell into that or what really interested you about that.
And again, it was one of those things of just following the energy. And I
Mm.
actually got credentialed back in the 90s as a clinical hypnotherapist. And it
It
was just
was
one,
the 90s. Have you seen
exactly.
that
It was
guy?
the
I love
90s.
him.
We were just hypnotizing everybody.
Yeah.
But I got involved because it was I really got into meditation. That was part of
Yeah.
my root practice. When I
Yep, yep.
first started really doing rituals, I did a lot with crystals and stones, and I did a
Mhm,
lot with meditation. And it
mhm.
was through meditation that I discovered hypnotherapy and
Right.
actually going to a couple of stage hypnosis shows, which I thought were really, really fun. And
Frank
that's
Santos?
what
Was Frank
Frank
Santos?
Santos, absolutely.
Okay.
I was
Frank
on
Santos,
stage with Frank Santos.
so was I, 2 different times. The father and the son, and
I
they
haven't
both
met the son
hypnotized
yet,
me.
but the father was awesome.
Yep,
Frank Santos was he was just awesome.
yep.
And so that's what actually got me started in it. And it's a fun journey because I can go out and with a group of people that are in want to have some fun, do stage hypnosis. I do a lot of therapeutic type hypnosis, but
Right.
I do enjoy doing past life regression and other types of group meditative type hypnosis. And
Okay.
it's just a lot of fun to do, and it's amazing to see people have that light go off or that aha
Mhm.
moment with
Yeah.
something that you're working with them on actually develops out of the session.
Right. I think it's really cool that you do that because that takes a lot of, cadence and patience and some of the things that for me I don't necessarily have. I'm too animated. I get excited and I don't know if it's the fact that I'm Italian that I yell and I scream and I get excited and I get amped up and like
Deeper,
before.
deeper.
Exactly, right, whoa, but I think that it's really interesting that you do that because I can't bring myself to that level of being very status quo and talking in a certain cadence and a certain voice and a certain monotone, but, I've done hypnosis sessions with you, and, I absolutely enjoyed it. Was it a past life that we did?
No, it was actually meeting a spirit guide.
Yes, which is also really cool and very interesting. But I have done past life regression, just not with you. And I think that it's so, informative to what that we do and kind of gives us a little bit more of a background of who we are and why we do some of the things that we do. Right. So,
Exactly.
past life I think is great. Meeting your spirit guide is also wonderful because again, it bridges that gap a little bit and gives you a little bit of solace of like, oh, okay, that's why all of those things have been popping up, and I've been noticing this or talking about this specific thing, and I'm not Egyptian, but why am I talking about Isis? Like I don't even know why I'm seeing that all over the place, and kind of matching up all of those little pinpoints and moments to what your life looks like. So I really enjoy that. But what else do people use hypnosis for?
I've had people use it for the regular stuff, as you would think, smoking cessation,
Hmm.
modifying of diets, for weight loss and that sort of thing. If you
Right.
notice, I don't call it that because
Mm.
I don't believe in anyone being hypnotized to lose weight. I believe in people being hypnotized to change triggers, to modify behaviors, which
Hmm.
in essence is going to bring you to exactly where you need to be
Right.
from any type of body standpoint as well as life standpoint.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I also do it for missing objects. Like I had one person call up, a client who had lost or misplaced one of her diamond rings, and
Hmm.
she came in and we did a session, and I brought her back to the last time she was wearing it, and when she took it off, she atypically put it on top of the refrigerator because the cat was being extra feisty that day.
Yeah.
And so she went home with that information, went on top of the refrigerator, and there was her ring.
Wow. That's incredible. I think that, that idea of changing the behavior is really kind of interesting and poignant to say at this moment, because that's what any of these messages with divination is supposed to do. It's not supposed to tell your future. It's not supposed to tell you when you're going to meet that tall, handsome guy, or when you're going to have a baby, or when you're going to do certain things. It gives you a little bit of clarity within those measures. But I think that the idea of divination and what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to change your mindset or your behavior, your pattern, and how you're supposed to think. It shakes things up a little bit, but at the same time gives you some of that, affirmation that things are happening, or an explanation of why things are happening. Do you agree
Exactly.
with that? Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And one of the
Mm.
things I always tell clients, and one of my favorite sayings in the world, is perception is reality. So if
Hmm.
you can change your own perception, you're going to change your own reality.
Right.
What we perceive is based upon triggers we might have had growing up,
Hmm.
trigger words that we don't even realize are there. Like guaranteed, one of the trigger words, if I say it right now, it's going to affect you, it's going to affect Mike, and it's going to
Right.
affect a lot of people in this audience. And that word is but. You hear
Right.
but, and you're like, motherfucker, you're coming up with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Of course.
And
I
so
always say, oh, I always say that. Okay, here's a but, and it's usually a big one.
and that's your way of disarming that word, which is
Right.
interesting that you actually do that, but not surprising because you're quite obviously in touch with your intuitive self as well as others people. And so that's an important way of disarming a trigger, and that's exactly one of the things that I do when we're going through a hypnotic session for that, is take triggers that we've talked about during the interview and change the perception of that trigger. So now
Hmm.
but now the big one is no
Right.
longer harmful, hurtful, or brings you back to the fifth grade. Now it's all
Right.
about, okay, what do we got going on type of thing.
Right, right. Like maybe again, that whole idea of changing the mindset a little bit. And that way, there you can kind of have a little bit more insight as to what's happening within your life. And as you know, and I use tarot, also mediumship. I know that you do too. Those of you who do not know, I usually refer to Brian as my work husband,
It's
just
true.
because we hang out a lot together when we do events, and we have gravitated towards each other, so we're very familiar, which is why, again, I thank you for being my first guest. As my work husband, I do appreciate all the things that you've done and that you continue to do, and support. But anyway, understanding that, doing these things and coming to these conclusions, it's not for us as the reader. It is for that person who's asking, the querent or the client or however you look at it. We're trying to help them. It
Exactly.
doesn't benefit us to talk about some of these things. It benefits them, and it's supposed to change that approach, or give some sort of affirmation or accolade or whatever, give you that pat on the back if you so need it, or just a little bit of clarity as we go forward,
Or
right?
sometimes a little
So
pat on the forehead.
exactly. Yeah, or not, it's not pee pee pee. It's not one of those. It
Right.
is, and I feel like every deliverance, in the sense of every reader, or every divinator, or whoever you want to look at it. We all do it differently. And, another topic that I do like to kind of bring up when I do talk about this subject is that not everybody has the same abilities. Not everybody is as, clear or concise or whatever you want to say about certain tools or methods or media, but at the same time we all have a different way of delivering these messages or perfecting our craft. nobody is
Exactly.
as Nobody is better or worse or whatever. It just depends on who needs to hear the message and how it needs to be. I don't feel like any of us are different than what our approach is, if that's something that you kind of are on the same page with me on.
Totally agree. And like when I'm doing fairs, like you've done fairs
Mm,
with me. People come up to the table and like, I'm not sure if I want a reading with you. And at that stage of the game, a lot of times my response is, if you're not sure, you probably don't.
exactly.
Because
Hmm.
you're going to feel if you want a reading from me.
Right.
And I'll be honest with them. And just like with some clients, I've had people come to the table and they want a reading after they get a reading literally with you and with
Right.
other readers that might have been like the same question. And I won't
Right.
do that. I
Right.
won't
No.
entertain that.
Mm-mm.
And just like if someone wants a book every week with me, but it's always going to be that same question, I'm not going to take your money. I'm not that type of person. I'm going to give you the message you need to hear. It's up
Right.
to you to take that message to heart or to blow it off. But I'm not going
Yep.
to continually go
Right.
on that same topic with you.
Right. And I think that has a lot to do with free will. So, what we do as readers, we're giving you these messages, we're talking to you about personal things, we're trying to help you sort through or suss out all the things that have transpired, i.e., some of those triggers or some of those things that have transpired within your life and how we figure them out. But at the end of the day, and at the end of the reading, especially, that person, that client has free will. So they can take that information and throw it away, or they can make it to change their life accordingly based on however they see fit. And I think that
Right.
that's really important to say, along the lines of that we don't tell your future. You are in control of your future.
We're going to
Yes,
tell
we
you a snapshot of right now.
exactly.
And one
Yes.
of the things I tell everyone as they're leaving the table is like, take what resonates, leave the rest behind. If
Hmm.
it doesn't resonate with you, don't even think about it again.
Right.
Just
Right.
think about what resonates.
Right, exactly. And I tell people too, which is along those same lines of, you know what, you may not understand that right now. Put it in your back pocket. It may come forward for you eventually, or it may hit you when you're dealing with somebody else, and it's fine. We don't have to be Johnny on the spot who knows everything at this exact moment. Snapshot is perfect timing, and I think that expression and how that we use it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And
When
I think some people just don't want to take the responsibility of
yeah,
where they're going, what direction they're going into. And that's one of the things, like when I'm doing readings, and I know it's very similar to how you do readings, it's sort of like a reading slash counseling session,
yes,
and a big portion of that for me is like, hey, we all need to take self responsibility for certain aspects within our life and take
hmm,
that control. Because if we're not taking that control, we are literally handing that control over to somebody else that's within
hmm,
our circle currently. And
right,
I think that's important for people to hear. But
right.
more importantly, I think it's most important for people to take to heart.
Yeah. And again, sometimes what we say is very therapeutic or cathartic in nature because what we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to make sense to you. So, you hearing, for instance, if it's, a reading between the two of us, sometimes we need to hear some hard truths in order to change that approach or change that pattern and to go forward. And sometimes we need to hear the accolade of you're actually doing a good job. You're kicking ass and taking names,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to continue in that vein as well, because that's also quite important to look at too. I feel like sometimes tarot sessions or readings in general you end up being a cheerleader, a counselor, a business partner, a coach, you name it. It's kind of all rolled into one, depending on what that person needs. But you did say something earlier that I want to agree with you on. If it's a topic that is very sensitive in nature and that person wants to continuously check in or compare notes or go to different readers to see if they get a different perspective. I think that and what that it is that as a person who's getting a reading, you kind of have to take that information and percolate a little bit. You can't just take it and
Yes.
be like, well, I want to compare and see if Sarah says the same thing that Brian says, says the same thing that, that person says, or that reader does, or whatever. You have to take that information, put it in your soul contract, and look at it over again later and say, you know what, that makes sense, or that is absolutely off the mark.
True.
But it's for you to take that info and go forward with it, right?
Exactly right. And it's especially like if you're getting the same message from various readers, it's like, yo, this is the universe's way of like trying to shake you awake and say, this
Right.
is not what you're
Duh.
ready for.
Right.
However, if you modify this portion of your life, your
Right.
perceptions, do some of that self work that's no one wants to do, but it's most important to do, then
Yep.
maybe going forward, you'll get to where you want to be. You'll get that goal that you're so wanting to get.
Right. And it's really funny to look at. I keep saying it's funny. I need a new phrase. But it's I'm like, you know what? I feel like every single day I always have a phrase that I'm like, I said that 15 times today, and I need to not say that anymore. It's like actively change that button in my head and be like, stop saying that. But I enjoy this conversation and talk about things like this, because especially with another reader that, yes, I have seen you in action, and yes, I have gotten readings from you and can attest to how magical and how wonderful that you really are. But what you are saying didn't come from us talking about this earlier today. It came from your own perspective, and it's
Yeah,
very like-minded of mine, but it's not the same. And I think that it's important to look at that and be like, oh, not everybody, we're not carbon copies of each other. We're not, if you've seen, what is the movie with Pee Wee Herman, and he goes to see the psychic, and she goes, the bike's at the Alamo. Like, we're not
yes,
doing that. We're just doing something that makes sense to different people at different moments. So if somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I don't know if I want a reading with you today, you don't take offense to that, right?
never. Just I
No.
just like I don't answer questions like what color am I thinking of? What number am I thinking of? Blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm not here for an interview. However, if you want to talk about what happened to you at 5 years old, sit down and grab yourself a drink because I'll tell you all about your life. But I don't do entertainment.
No, that's if you're doing hypnosis on stage, which is really funny. But I
Yeah,
mean, although I gotta say, as readers, though, we do have to be entertaining, because there have been people that, no names mentioned, but there have been other readers and other people that have been in our circle, or in our kind of our projection here, where we've seen them be very monotone and not very entertaining and not very animated in certain ways. And I look and I go, you're dealing with the public. Like, maybe you should amp up your game a little bit instead of be like, oh my god, blah, blah, blah. Right? Don't you?
right? Totally agree with that. Or the people that will actually read to the person. Um,
Right. Oh
because
gosh.
there are some cards that have messages that you can actually read, of course. And to me, that's annoying. And that's because it doesn't resonate with me. If
Right.
people do that and they're getting messages that way, God bless you. I
Yeah.
wish you well with all of that. And
Right.
it's okay to say God bless you if you're wage or pagan or anything else, because
Right. Yeah.
relative to that person. But the
Right.
reality of it is, it's got to come from that inner self, not just from words on a printed page. If a word
Right.
pops out and that's what you're really focusing on, that
Hmm.
too is a form of divination. You can open up a book and look for a message by just not focusing on the words, but waiting for that one word to jump out at you.
And
And that's the
smack you in
word.
the face.
Exactly. And that's what you need to focus on. So,
Right.
but someone that will sit there and go through, open a book, and then read a paragraph, it's great if you're sitting at home, it's a house
Yeah.
party, and you're having some
Mm.
fun, have at it. But if you're collecting money from someone, I find that to
Yeah.
be just a little disrespectful.
Right. And sometimes I feel like, even though you might not have a grasp of the deck that you're using, or the tool that you in particular you might be using, it's okay to open up that book and say, like, I just need to find a good word that's gonna, because this is how I feel. I just want to make sure.
Exactly.
But yeah, sometimes also when somebody reads a big paragraph, you get lost in that. You're like, okay, well, what does this mean to me? But I think that practicing and making sure that you're very aware of what you're using. Like I said earlier, this deck, this Golden Art Nouveau, I've been using this exclusively for the past 3 years within my office. And I liken decks to shoes, where sometimes you're going to wear that
Yes.
comfy pair of flip flops, but there are other times that you have to get a little dressed up. So you're going to wear something a little bit more formal. So you might use something different, but you always end up going back to what feels right to you. For me, I do feel like that is the Rider Waite Smith esque deck, where that is that basis. Is that the same for you, or do you gravitate towards other things?
No, I have probably, like you do, more decks than we actually legally should have.
Right.
Um, but I do like the Rider Waite Smith style. Like
Yeah.
this is just one of the decks that I use. This
Hmm.
is one that was calling me to draw a card and play with today.
Hmm.
So it depends on the day and such. When I'm doing readings at fairs, I usually have 2 or 3 different decks out that the person can actually choose because I want them to pick a deck that's going to resonate with them as
Yeah.
well. And
That's
my decks,
interesting.
and it just seems like a good fit. Like with Currents, them doing that, they're automatically getting accustomed to because it's something that's calling out to them. So they're actually already resonating with a big portion of what's going to happen
Right.
next.
Yeah, that's really interesting and kind of worthwhile to bring up, because not everybody does that. I know that I don't. I take one deck and that's all you get. You get what you get and you don't get upset with me. But I feel like it makes more sense and it's more personal to the people that you are reading, based on the fact that you have a multitude of decks that they can choose from, because there's a reason of why they're doing that. So
Right.
ultimately, you're reading them, or you're starting the process of that read, or that that message, even before they've even touched something, or that you've tapped into their energy, which is pretty cool. I think, I never thought of it like that. I'm under the impression of, this is the one that works with me right now, that I like, and that's where I'm going to go with it. But for you, it's like, you're already starting that process a little bit earlier, just based on the fact that the client or the querent picks their own deck. That's
Right. And the decks are all friends of mine. They're all the decks that I own that all resonate with me.
yeah,
So it's just like having a group of friends. A new person coming into the circle is going to gravitate towards one friend more so than the other friends. And
right.
that's what that option is there for them for.
Right, I like that. Do as your decks are friends, do they get along with each other, or do they not play well together?
Most of them do. I got one deck, the Crows deck, which is really kind of
Oh
a
yeah,
yeah. They can be challenging with other decks and with even with people. They tend to
yeah.
be more of the that more in your face reading. So when
Isn't that
someone
funny?
really wants a reading, I'll actually pull that deck out without them asking for it, and I'll use that deck. It's a very
Yeah,
serious deck to me.
yeah. That's your serious business deck. Like, we're talking
Yeah,
about business here. We need to get serious, and so that's when the
exactly.
Crow Tarot comes out. I do know that deck. I do have a copy of it, and it does not play nice with me, I'll tell you. But that's okay. I enjoy all decks of all different kinds, and the thing is, it's like, like I said, they're kind of like shoes. So, when you really enjoy shoes, like, you know, or anything,
Right?
you're going to buy a lot of them and you're going to figure out which ones really work with you. And that's
Yeah.
another thing that really goes into that whole idea of tools, or what it is that we're working with. Sometimes you really gravitate towards one thing, and then that one crazy deck comes into, or that crazy situation happens, and you really enjoy something else for a long time, and it's because your energy has changed.
Exactly right.
Hmm.
Exactly right. And it
Yep.
happens all the time. Like even with decks, it's like I'm gonna use a deck that day because of what I'm feeling that day. If I'm really
Hmm.
having a dynamic time, we'll call it, I actually pull a Crows deck out because I know I'm gonna get the message that I need to hear. It's gonna probably be serious, but it's gonna push me to take more control over a circumstance that might be going
Right.
on that I'm
Right.
aware or maybe not aware of.
Right. It's gonna smack you upside the noggin. That's what it's gonna do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's another topic we can kind of touch on. As a reader, I don't read for myself. I don't like to do it. If it's a quick and easy, like, should I be doing this today? Yep. But I don't go into deep dives when it
Me
comes to
either.
myself. And you know why? Because that's hard to do. And there are people who are very, very, very prolific at that and what they do. And they're very efficient at doing that for themselves. But when I teach my tarot classes and I talk about these things, the first thing that I say is that you start reading for yourself and you start reading for your friends because that's the hardest place to start. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Because then you get away from that and you realize, yeah, I don't want to hear those messages. I'm too analytical. I don't want to hear that right now. But sometimes you need a touch base and sometimes you need a little, moment where you're like, am I doing the right thing? Did I make that right choice? Is this what today is going to be like? Then you kind of go with it and realize, that that's where you need to be. But I don't read for myself.
Yeah, the most I do is like literally just like that. What kind of day I'm gonna have, and usually I'll do like a 3 card pull for
Mhm.
that, and
Mhm.
just give me an idea of where I'm going, what I need to be aware of, and what lessons I need to be aware of at the end of the day to focus on when I come home, type of thing. And a 1 card for like, is this going to be a good idea? Should I pursue this a little bit further? Let me, that sort of thing. But I
Right.
will use the decks too when I'm working with spirit. If
Yep.
I want to connect more or find out more about spirit, I'll
Right.
do readings where the spirit sort of becomes the querent, and the messages that they have for me are going to come through the card. And I start
That
off when
is cool.
I start off with an identifying card. Okay, spirit, you're going to let me know male, female, young, old type of thing, and I'll pull a card with that, and then we'll start our conversation.
I've never done that before, and I think I'm gonna try to do that. See, this is always a learning experience when it comes
True.
to dealing with other people who do different things. Nobody, has all of the tools under their tool belt. So what they do is that we share things, and I feel really comfortable in doing that because I've never done that before, and that's something that I really want to do. So thank you
Oh,
for
that'd
letting
be
me know
awesome with
about
you.
that. Yeah,
With
yeah.
your
I mean.
connection with spirit, it'd be amazing.
Having that other side, right? And understanding that and trusting that, that is something that I feel like I can absolutely go forward with and have an accurate experience with as long as it comes to what I'm asking isn't too dire, right?
Exactly right. And a lot of times for me, it's like, what messages do you have for me, or what do you want? Like some of the questions I'll ask, like, what West message do you have for me? But what do
Right.
you want me to know about yourself? Because I always find when communicating with spirit, it's really rude when it's all about me, and not asking about you, and just
Right.
having that same conversation. Just because they're not embodied doesn't mean that they don't want to actually discuss a little bit about their energy, where they're at, where
Right.
they've been, that sort of thing.
Right. Well, this has been an amazing talk. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to talk about what you have going on, where people can find you, and anything else that you want to kind of talk about in the sense of what Evolving Vibes is like.
Sure. Well, people can find me definitely on any of the social media platforms. I do have a YouTube channel called Evolving Vibes. You
Hmm.
can reach out to me in any one of those. I do private readings. I do a lot of psychic fairs. I've sort of been preoccupied this season with
Hmm.
doing a lot of spirit work. So one of the
Hmm.
main focuses I do is I'm fortunate enough to be able to say I work at the Conjuring House. And
Hmm.
so I host paranormal investigations there for overnight guests
Hmm.
once, twice, 3 times a month. And my next one coming up actually is this Friday night. They start at 7 until 8 in the morning. And people get to experience the paranormal, get to
Hmm.
experience the house itself. And what I try to tell people, and it goes for both you as well as I, when I'm doing things with spirit, I like to explain that I'm more of a spirit advocate. I'm here to
Okay.
enlighten you about what the paranormal world is versus what you believe it is, as well as the house itself, as well as we're going to call them ghosts because that's what most people actually refer to them as,
Hmm. Yep.
versus what people expectation of ghosts are. Like they're not
Right.
going to possess you, they're not going to pick you up and throw you against the wall. They may
It's
push you
not
a
a
little bit.
movie. It's not a movie.
Exactly. A lot of that is just based upon a lot of that Hollywoodism. You got to
Mhm.
make it really fabulous and really exciting in order to maintain attention. But
Right.
most of the time, it's knocks, it's footsteps, it's communicating with lights, and a lot of other different
Mhm.
phenomenon. So that's where this season's really had a lot of my focus and a lot of my attention, which has been really, really wonderful. I had some really wonderful experiences there. I got a friend that works with me there, Tracy, who is probably watching, but this is one of the cups she gave me. It's little cat paw cups,
Oh,
glasses. But shout out to her because she'll be with me on Friday doing the overnight event. But it's a lot of fun.
yeah. I think it's really cool that you said that because you're right. Is it ghosts? Is it spirits? Is it, the other side? Is it whatever? I think it's a combo of all of those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And who is your favorite to connect with at the Conjuring House? Because I know that there are certain ones that are known in the air buddy quotes to be there. So who's your favorite to connect with?
My favorite, most playful is the little boy. He can go by
Okay.
Billy, he goes by various names. I won't get into each and every one of them, but he's a little boy, but he likes having a lot of fun. And
Hmm.
he pushes things, he knocks things over, he throws things. He's bopped me off the head with a matchbox card before. One of the things that just happened that I'm incorporating now in the experience is I discovered he likes playing with balloons. And so I had a
Really?
little cat light inside of a balloon, and I put it down because he was communicating through EMF,
Hmm.
and which is all lights lighting up, of course. And I said, if you want, touch the balloon and we can play back and forth. And I put the balloon down and literally took a step back, and you could see that he touched it, picked it up, and his energy popped the balloon,
Oh my
which was
goodness. Isn't
so
that interesting?
cool.
So
It
not only
was.
are you a medium, you're also a paranormal investigator, which is really cool. I think that a lot of people think that that's what we do anyway, but sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. But it's really great that, and pretty cool that you go to the Conjuring House and that you work there and that they do interact with you, not just on a messages, i.e., medium standpoint. They're playing with you as you would if you went to any other location. I think that's pretty
True.
cool.
And you and I've been there before, and hopefully,
Yeah.
I'm going to get you in working with me, like as an assistant on one of these paranormal nights
Oh
of
my
the
God, I would
overnight
love to.
investigation,
I
and
had
to
a
play
great
together.
experience there. But I think we're almost done with the show. So, Brian, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being not only my work husband, and also being my first guest here on this podcast, The Witches In with Sarah G, Witch MD. This has been a really great experience. I love talking about all this stuff with you. If you ever want to come back, please let me know. And,
Anytime.
yeah. And if anybody wants to book a reading with Brian or is looking to connect to do other things, because Brian has a myriad of things that he does, please check out not only his website, his Facebook page, his Instagram page, and his YouTube channel. And we can
Absolutely.
absolutely set something up for you. But I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everybody, for visiting with me on my very first podcast. I will see you next Tuesday at 7:05 with the Witches.